The closing date was 1 day away, and we get a phone call from our realtor. That closing was not going to happen the next day. So there we were, with no contract on the house, with the prospect of starting over as far as listing the house and looking for new buyers or going back to those who had already made an offer and looked at the house. We were in a pretty dark place knowing what to do.
Yeah. We talked with our realtor and we were trying to discuss the different options. What we really would prefer to do is just do a local fix.
Yep.
Just fix the one problem area on the house. Unfortunately, all the roofers seem to agree that that's just not a viable option. That if you fix one area of the roof, you have to fix it all because you're not going to be able to match the shingles back up just right. It'll be obvious, it won't look good, and it didn't actually take care of the problem, which was not knowing what kind of condition the flashing was in, which was under all 3 layers of shingles. So when it came down to it, we really needed to do a full tear off of the roof and completely redo the roof of our house. The problem was, how were we going to pay for that? We did not have the cash to pay for a full tear off of the roof, which was going to cost about $12,000.
Yeah. So if we had that cash on hand, we could have just paid for the roof and be done with it.
Mm-hmm.
What we didn't know, and what our realtor told us at this point in the process, is that we could go ahead and contract with one of the roofers, have the work done, but then they would be paid by the title company out of the proceeds of the sale of the house. So when we heard that, we thought, oh, all right, let's do that. And so that's what we decided to do. We contacted the roofer that we like best, explained the situation, and they said that they would be willing to work with us. Mm-hmm. So we signed a contract that they would do the work, and then once the house closed, then they would be paid in full out of the proceeds of the house sale. And so that is what ended up happening.
Mm-hmm. Once we figured out how exactly we wanted to handle the roofing issue,
mm-hmm.
then we had to figure out how we were going to handle the selling of the house again.
Yeah.
Would we start all over? Would we go back to everyone who had made an offer? And at the end of the day, what seemed to make the most sense was to go back to our original buyer who had contracted with us and see if they were still interested. Now that we kind of figured out our issue with, yes, we were going to redo the roof, we figured out how we were going to pay for it. Were they still interested in the house, or were they just ready to walk away completely?
The buyer said, yes, we still want to buy the house if the roof can be fixed before closing, and we reached an agreement. All the parties were happy, and so we finally got a new contract with the house sale.
Now, our original closing date was supposed to be March 22nd.
Yep.
So with all that needed to transpire before closing, we were not in a super big hurry to close on the house because there was nothing for us to rush off into. And the buyer did not seem to be in any big hurry. So we reset the closing date for April 11th.
So with the new contract, with the original buyers, with the new roof tear off and replacement, everything was figured out. We did not need to go through inspection again
Mm-hmm.
because the house was already inspected. So that hurdle was out of the way.
So one of the next steps in the home sale process was appraisal. We had to make sure that the house would appraise out at what we had contracted for the buyer to pay for the house. And that was kind of an interesting process because we never heard what the actual appraisal number was.
Yeah.
All they told us was that once the appraisal was done, it did indeed appraise out where it needed to in order for us to get the amount we had agreed upon.
So we were kind of nervous about going through the appraisal process, but it turned out good, that the house appraised for what we had agreed to sell it for and what the buyers had agreed to buy it for.
And other than the roof, the only other thing that the buyer requested we fixed from the home inspection was our radon fan had stopped working. The final hurdle was getting the well tested. Our house had well water, but city sewer.
Yep.
And so that was not an issue with the sewer, but the water quality had to be tested and making sure the mechanicals on the well worked, and fortunately that all came together. So those were all of the little hurdles that we had to get through before our house could close.
Yep. All right, so we got through all of the hurdles that you need to get through when selling a house. We fixed up the house. We listed the house. We got a contract on the house. We got through inspection. We got through the roof negotiation, renegotiation. We got the buyers and us to agree. We got through the appraisal process, all of these barriers, and we're working up to closing date. The closing date was 1 day away, and we get a phone call from our realtor. That closing was not going to happen the next day. 1 day before we're supposed to close, it looked like everything was about to fall through. This was not good. This is not the news that we wanted. This is every seller's headache. You get through all of these hurdles only to be at the last minute out of the deal.
Hey guys, I have a couple minutes here in the car, so I thought I would give you just a little bit of an update on what's going on. We found out that our closing has been postponed. Now, you probably recall that our closing had already been postponed once because we could not come to an agreement with the buyer about a roofing issue and closing date. And when we were able to get that all worked out, we ended up having to postpone closing for 3 weeks so that we could get the roof on before closing. Well, we just got notified last week that the buyer has had a little bit of a hiccup between them and the lender because of a filing tax issue and paperwork and accountants, and I don't even know all the details. Our closing was completely up in the air. They did not give us an answer as to when it would happen, if it would happen, and we initially got that phone call. It really didn't look good.
So the question that we have for you in YouTube land is this: how do you handle it when things do not go as expected, when things fall through?
I think that sometimes we really have to kind of check ourselves and ask ourselves the questions: what are my expectations? Do I need to change my expectations? Do I need to readjust my expectations to meet the needs of others? Are my expectations realistic even? And when we answer no to those things, my expectations are not realistic, they're too high, they're not what they should be, but we refuse to change them, we find ourselves frustrated. We find ourselves even going down a road of being depressed because things just aren't going the way that we think they should. It's an opportunity to either choose selfishness and demand that everyone kind of circle back to what you want, or it's a chance to bend and show love sacrificially to others. And I know sometimes I do well with that, but a lot of times I fail at that. And so this was certainly an opportunity for us to kind of check our expectations and just circle back and be like, you know, are we trusting the Lord in this once more? And a fun story from that is, do you remember what happened the weekend after we were supposed to close our house?
Yes.
I have to show this to you because there's a crazy God story involved here. It's April 15th. We were supposed to close on our house on April 11th and pick up our trailer on April 13th, which was Friday. Today is the 15th, and that's Sunday. And when we got the news a week and a half ago that closing was not going to happen, of course we were disappointed. It had already been postponed once so that we could get a roof on the house. But this is just evidence that sometimes you just don't know what God is up to. If this had been our first weekend in the trailer, that would have been an absolutely miserable start to our experience. There's no full hookups around here until May 1st. And so we would have had electric, which means we would have had electric only. So we would have been warm, but we wouldn't have been fully settled into the trailer. We wouldn't have been able to fully utilize our toilet or our sinks or showers, which means that we would have had to step out into this to go use bathrooms or shower. And it's cold and gross. And anyway, all that to say that you don't always know what God is up to. And he could have a big, way larger plan than this. But we are super thankful that he protected us from this and that this won't be our first weekend in the trailer. So God is good.
April 15th, 2018, and making a snowman in the yard.
What do you think? April 15 in Wisconsin. Tie it around. Just loop this.
Nicely done.
High five.
Wait, we need a hat.
I like it.
Good job, guys.
What do you
High
think?
five, snowman.
Can we take a...
You wanna go sledding now?